Impressionism using pastels with Mr. G. All right. Hey, we're giving you some techniques today. Let's say we wanted to look at that left picture there, the left pastel drawing that I did, and I just wanted to reproduce it. So usually what I do is very important when you're starting with pastels, usually with painting as well, is working from dark to light. So I put something down dark first just to give myself a little bit of a line as to where the sky is and where it's kind of like a horizon line, if you remember that from last year. And I'm just going to put down a little bit of a layer of my darker blue, my sky blue, and then I'm just going to blend it in with my finger. You can do this with your fingers. It's probably the best, I think, to do with your finger. Paper towel doesn't work as well. And then I'm going to take a lighter blue. It's kind of the sky getting a little bit lighter on the top. And then I'm going to blend that in also. You just kind of do this, what they call scumbling. You kind of maybe make like little figure eights with your fingers, and it blends it in really well rather than going back and forth and back and forth. See how I'm kind of doing these little kind of figure eight type things with the chalk. And then I'm going to do the same kind of a deal with my fingers. And it blends it in really nicely. And again, since we're dealing with Impressionism, we're just kind of giving the impression of sky. It's the same thing with the bottom part here. I'm going to add some darker color because there's going to be shadow in this painting, this pastel paint. And then I'm going to add a little bit of green to it, over it. And that automatically makes your green a little bit darker, which is good because this pastel set doesn't have a darker green to it. And then I'll do the same kind of blending with my finger. Now it looks like I'm going back and forth a little bit, but you can do both ways. I'm just doing this very softly, very gently. I'm not pushing down very hard because I don't want to really blend that color in too much into the paper itself. And now I'm going to do this kind of a rocking back and forth motion. This is kind of the impressionist. This is where the impressionistic part of it comes down to, is how we use the pastels to kind of create things. So I'm just kind of rocking back and forth. I'll demonstrate this a little bit later off to the side. But right now I'm just going to kind of blend it in just a little bit with my finger, just to kind of tap it. So that's giving you the illusion of light coming down and making that grass appear lighter. Now what I'm trying to do is just to make a small little evergreen tree, like a Christmas tree. And then I'll start out with darks, and then I'm going to add a little bit of a lighter, probably my darkest green that I have on top of that, and make a few marks, once again rocking back and forth. And then I'm going to add like a yellow to it for a little bit of highlighting. I usually try to pay attention to what side of my picture that the light is coming from, and in this case it's on the left side, so that's where I'm putting most of my light. And it's just going to give you kind of the impression of an evergreen tree. If you looked at it, you'd probably be able to tell somebody that that's probably an evergreen tree there. My fingers are getting really dirty by this point. Feel free to wipe off your fingers. You can use a paper towel. Maybe grab a wipe if you need it. Now I'm going to kind of demonstrate this rocking back and forth up here. Pretend it's like a little airplane that's going down, touching the runway and coming up, and then it's going backwards and hitting the runway and going. So you can kind of see how those little pock marks happen. I guess you would kind of call it that, a little pock mark. And this is, can you guess what the impression is here? What I'm trying to give impressions of. It's flowers, just trying to show flowers in the fields. And each one of these flowers, I'm going to start over here with like kind of a dark purple, but then I know I want to give it a little bit of highlight. So I'm going to find a lighter purple, like that. And then just kind of go, it doesn't even matter if you're hitting on top of your darker purple, because this is Impressionism. It's going to give you the impression that there are highlights on these flowers and maybe little lights. And especially with the purples, I like to use a little bit of white too, make them stand out even more. You can do that with the whatever color flowers you want. the lighter color of each. And then sometimes if you add white to it, it makes them kind of stand out a little bit more. Here's just a quick demonstration of just another landscape with some water in front. Now it may appear that the water starts out black, but water isn't necessarily blue. It's a reflection of what's above it and what's around it. So you'll see that I start out dark, but then I'm going to add some light to it and kind of match these clouds above it with some blue. All right, so now we're looking at some lily pads on some waters with some flowers around it. So in this particular instance, I did this over 4 different times. And I'm starting out with the water. And the water, if you look at it, it looks like it's black with some highlights of white in it, some white reflections in it. So that's what I've done. And then I'm going to put some lily pads in there. Notice that I'm not putting these lily pads exactly like the other one, because I'm just giving you some impression that there's lily pads on this lake, or a little pond, I guess. And then I'm going to fill in kind of the areas that are darker, and then you can see that there's areas that are lighter on the water because they're reflecting the sky above. Just doing some small strokes for the flowers. And again, just using my fingers to lighten the edges of everything that I've put down so far. Putting some of that reflection from the light in. And now I'm starting to add some lighter greens and maybe even some yellow to make these lily pads look a little bit more impressionable as lily pads rather than just all green. Then you can tell that there's some light and shadow. I'm going to give you just a fast motion view of just a plain landscape with some trees in the background, a sky in the background. So you notice I've laid down some darks where those trees are going to be way in the background. And then this area itself in the foreground, the front, is going to be grass. So I'm going to put all my greens, kind of scumble that in, and then blend it in. And I'll come in and fill that out with flowers after a while. You notice that what color paper I started with. I started with more of a natural color, because sometimes using white paper doesn't lend itself very well to natural landscapes. A lot of artists like to use different color paper, so I thought it'd be fun for you to try this with a different color paper. If you'd like to, you can use white as well if you're more comfortable with that. I'm just putting little grass-like blades, starting dark and then going lighter, and you'll see that it kind of gives the impression of some grass. Now I know that there's some flowers out in the field, so I'm going to give some impression that there are these flowers everywhere. Plus it just makes the picture that much more interesting. If it was just a straight green field, it wouldn't be that interesting. Notice I'm trying some purples and some oranges, just like I showed you just in the demonstration video. And then I'm going to add some clouds, some white in the top, and just kind of blend it in. And there's the final product.